Ghostbusters Afterlife. This is the somewhat reboot, somewhat sequel to the Ghostbusters films from the 80s. This one is directed by Jason Reitman, the son of Ivan Reitman, the man who directed the original Ghostbusters. And Jason Reitman has directed some wonderful films of his own. Thank You for Smoking is one of my favorite movies. I think Juno is excellent. I really enjoyed Up in the Air. He's a very talented guy. In this film, you have two siblings who become forced to move into their dead grandfather's house for the summer, only to realize that their dead grandfather is a former Ghostbuster, and craziness ensues. Jason Reitman, to me, is the biggest star of this movie. His films always look very good, but to me, his strong suit as a director has always been that he does a great job of getting natural performances from his actors, and here is no exception. The main characters in this movie are kids. They range from ages like 12 to like somewhere between 15 and 17. That's kind of a joke in the movie. A character lies about his age, and at no point does it feel like the kid actors are acting. They all feel very natural. Their chemistry is very good, and the lead performance by McKenna Grace is like legitimately great. Like I think she's wonderful in this, and I've seen her in some other stuff. I know she was in I, Tonya for a little bit, but I bet she's probably going to be in movies for a really long time because I found her character totally charming. And there is a moment where it is pretty heavily implied that her character may be on the autism spectrum, and if that's the case, then hell yeah, I thought she did a great job. She's arguably my favorite part of this movie. Paul Rudd is as likable as ever, though I felt like they probably could have given him a little bit more to do in the latter part of the film, but he's one of the most likable actors of all time. He increases the quality of anything that he's in.
Because I like it when people think I do a good job.
I have some serious problems with how this movie wrapped up, and I'll talk about them, but for the first two-thirds, I really appreciated the fact that this wasn't just a remake of Ghostbusters. It existed in the same universe and it had the same DNA, but it felt like that an honest, natural passing of the torch. And I was endeared by the characters. I really was enjoying it, but then we got to the last act and the cracks in its foundation really started to shine through. This movie charmed me for a majority of its runtime, but we got about 2/3 of the way through and I realized, I like this, but it's not very funny. It's charming, and there are a few scarce one-liners that made me chuckle here and there, but especially compared to the original Ghostbusters, it does not pack the comedic wallop that movie packed. The biggest problem with this film, though, and it's a massive problem, quite frankly, is the ending. The movie goes on way too long, and that is an issue that has plagued so many Hollywood films over the last decade or so. It overstays its welcome, but I was still going with it then. But you get to the very end, the last 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm not going to spoil anything, though it's been a poorly kept secret. I mean, actors have been promoting their roles on late night TV shows, but if you've had your head in the sand and haven't paid attention and you're a fan of Ghostbusters, I'm not going to spoil it for you. I'll just make this analogy. Imagine if the 1984 Tigers in 2021, 37 years later, decided to put on the old English D uniforms again and play a game against this year's Atlanta Braves. It wouldn't end well, and it would probably come across as lazy, pandering, pathetic, and kind of sad. That's the last 15 minutes of Ghostbusters Afterlife. And there are going to be people who are going to enjoy it. I'm sure if you're a huge fan of the original films, hell, you might even cry. And I'm not going to belittle any person for feeling emotion while watching a movie. But the movie this has been compared to, and understandably so, is Star Wars The Force Awakens. And while I have many issues with the most recent Star Wars trilogy, just the first one, Force Awakens, did a masterful job of weaving in the old with the new. That movie is like a nostalgic masterpiece that provided other franchises with a template of how you reboot a franchise. This film does not stick the landing. It falls really flat, and for that reason, it dropped several rating points. I was actually cringing at the end of this movie. With that said, this is a nice little movie. I enjoyed it more than I didn't. It has some charming characters. I did not love it. I'm going to give it a mild recommendation, but it's over. And it speaks to something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. But I believe it is time that we, collectively, as a nation, move on from the idea that Ghostbusters was ever that important.
Is this true? Yes, it's true.
I really like the first Ghostbusters. I mean, it is a comedic classic. In many ways, it's kind of flawless. I mean, when you look at screenwriting and the characters, and the story and the pacing, it hits all the beats it needs to hit. I think it's a really, really good movie. But Ghostbusters is also one really good comedy that came out in the 80s. And for the better part of 35 years now, people have been clamoring for more Ghostbusters material. Well, you know what? We got it. And it's over. No more desperation. No more pounding your foot in the ground demanding for more. It's done. Let's move on. Like, I didn't see the 2016 all-female reboot. It just didn't interest me. I thought the trailers were awful. My guess is it's probably a really bad movie. But people reacted to the trailer for that movie the way that most people would normally react to finding out that, like, a family member had been shot. I really like the first Ghostbusters. I just don't think it's that important. Like, yes, and I know that's a little bit hypocritical coming from a guy who loves Spider-Man and who loves Batman and who adores Star Wars, but I'm sorry, if you believe that the first Ghostbusters is even in the same ballpark in terms of cinematic impact as the original Star Wars trilogy, you're out of your mind. I mean, the original Star Wars movies changed how movies were made and marketed forever. The first Ghostbusters, it's just a really good comedy. I never understood the idea that we needed to see an expansion of this universe. And we got it here, and it's better than it isn't. It's completely serviceable. But let's move on. I think that this has crippled us as a nation for the better part of 30 years. Now that my rant is over, I give this movie a 6 out of 10. I wanted to give it more. The biggest fault of this movie is when it overly relies on nostalgia, and the nostalgia in this movie is... So that'll do it for this review. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.